Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Mattias Johnsson Haake, one of the designers behind Symbaroum and the upcoming 5e expansion, Ruins of Symbaroum. Symbaroum is a fantasy tabletop RPG, often described as dark, gritty, and deadly. First released in Swedish in 2014, Symbaroum has captured the imagination of an ever-growing number of gamers. The setting revolves around the Ambrians, a civilization that 2 decades ago were forced to flee their ancestral soil after a devastating war. Their new and promised land borders on the vast forest of Davokar, covering the remnants of the Empire of Symbaroum, which fell into ruin hundreds of years ago. Brimming with natural resources and mythical treasures, the forest calls out to the Ambrians to be explored and exploited. But the road into its depths lays far from open. Not only are the shadowy halls beneath the foliage fraught with danger, monsters, and infectious corruption, but there are also the elves of the Iron Pact, who have vowed to die to keep anyone from disturbing the ruins of old, warning that the ancient evil of Symbaroum stirs in its sleep. The horrors of Davokar are about to waken. Now, the acclaimed setting of Symbaroum comes to the world's most popular role-playing game rules. The Ruins of Symbaroum encompasses the 3 richly illustrated base setting books, which provide special rules, custom classes, unique creatures, and much more. Ruins of Symbaroum invites DMs and players to enjoy the adventures in the world of Symbaroum using the 5th edition OGL rule set. Honestly, I think this intimate and rich setting is a must for all storytellers. If you haven't checked this game out, go and do so. The official launch date for the Ruins of Symbaroum 5e is June 7th, and it's currently available for pre-order on the Free League Publishing website. I'll put links to that and Mattias' other work on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. So let's just get started really simply. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Mattias Johnsson Haake. Live in Sweden, up north, not as far as the polar circle, but quite close to it. And I am co-owner, and I don't know, in small companies like Free League, which I'm part of, we tend to do like lots of various stuff just to help each other out and whatnot. So, but my main occupation, you can say, is being the brand director or game director of Symbaroum, and also now the project lead of the Ruins of Symbaroum 5e project that we're going to talk about today. And I have also worked as writer and editor on brands like Vess and Tales from the Loop, Forbidden Lands. The list goes on because, as I said, Mutant is one of the games that lies really close to my heart as well. So, did I mention Coriolis?
Humble brag.
I've had the honor of being project lead for Coriolis as well for a couple of years. But I'm now slowly turning it over to one of my colleagues, Kostalus, who is, we're trying to convince him to quit his day job and work more for us at the Free League.
So wow, an incredible history of lots of RPGs, like obviously lots of Free League RPGs, which is incredible. So how did you get started into RPGs? Like, were you always like a player? Did you like writing for stuff? Like, what kind of sort of RPGs that draw you into playing, I guess?
I started, I would say, kind of late in, I think it was 89. I was going on 17. And it was the bass player in my heavy metal band here in Umeå who sort of felt the nerd in me and introduced me to board games such as Talisman, if you know it. And then when he noticed me loving it, he dared introduce me to role-playing games as well, because this was at a time where role-playing games was like the most geeky and nerdy and negative thing you could ever do, especially for a hard rock drummer or a heavy metal drummer. And having been creative in all sorts of ways growing up, role-playing games as a hobby is super creative, I would say. Even if you don't write official material, the creation starts already at the table when you play together, whether you're a GM or a player. And me and my friends were, we could not just, consume role-playing games. So we bought official adventures and stuff, but we always, house ruled and edited the adventures and whatnot. And pretty soon the convention wave started here in Sweden. There were lots of small conventions, and several of us started writing scenarios for these conventions, especially the ones here locally in Umeå. And that was kind of how it started, because then for some still a bit unclear reason, a couple of us, or I think we're 6 of us here in Umeå, we decided to, why not try to do this for real? So we had 2 guys who liked to, run company, being the administrators, which was kind of lucky because
very lucky.
Yeah. And we were 3 writers and 2 artists. And we, on a hobby basis, while we were, doing the career thing and the building a family thing and whatnot, we wrote Swedish-only RPG called Mutant Undergångens Arvtagare, Heirs of Doom. It was like the prequel to Year Zero, the same brand, but the version of Mutant that came before Year Zero. And we were at it for 5 or 6 years. Finally, we also decided that we should give a go to create a brand of our own, and that became Coriolis. And this was like 2005 or 6 we started working on that. But it was strictly hobby back then, even though for several of us, especially for me and Martin Grip, who is still our lead artist at Free League, it was like the hobby that became more important than the day job and the career. So already then the hope was that one day, we could maybe make it as and live of it. It took 5 or 6 more years before that happened. And it happened with Symbaroum for me, not in Free League, but as this company called Järnringen. And me and Martin Grip and Mattias Lilja, also we took in Johan Noor, who is famous for Mörkborg.
Mörkborg, yeah.
Yeah, he also was the graphic designer of Symbaroum. So he has set the style for that. We decided right from the get-go that we would try to really make it this time. Go for an English launch, because you can't live off role-playing games in Swedish. That's just silly. We're like 10 million people, so it's like London.
It's one big, everyone in one London. Yeah, exactly.
And it took a couple of years, but since 2017, I've actually made a decent living of making role-playing games. And it's not just amazing, it's like it still feels kind of silly.
Oh no. But silly in a good way, right?
Silly in a very, very good way, but I feel silly saying it because it doesn't sound true. Sounds like I'm lying.
It is a dream, right? That to create your own stuff and have your own product, and like hearing about other people playing it and stuff like that. It's that's the beautiful, like, but you feel like, I don't know, we've got a phrase here, and again, you probably know it's imposter syndrome. I don't think it's that. It's just like, I've done it. What? How? It's more like that rather than like, oh no, how have they made me do this? So like, I've done this throughout years of hard work. Like you said, you've got a whole list of RPGs behind you, and you're like, I'm here. What? Like it's more that surprise, but also joy with it. So I totally see that.
And now that, because with the merger, when we merged with Free League, who has always been our friends, and I mean, already when we started Symbaroum, we had started talking with Thomas and Costa and Nils and Christian about someday making it together. And of course, it's been super hard work for many years, but now we starting to, I don't know, it feels like I can relax a little bit and enjoy it, because it feels like now anything can happen. But today we have such a fantastic and fan base.
Yes,
we have such, established relations within the gaming community as well. So finally, it feels like, you can start to look at the big picture and actually be happy about what we have accomplished.
Absolutely. I think it's always these things feel like, I mean, it is a lot of hard work, and it feels like, you do so much work. And then when you've done it a couple of times, you're like, actually, now we've got everything on board. We've done this process. Sometimes it gets easier in the sense of like, we know what to do. And you're at that place of confidence. But like you said, like once you've got a wonderful free league communities, like all the sort of spin-off communities around the products are so welcoming and so passionate about the RPGs. It's actually a wonderful, and there's so much like in terms of third-party content and just people excited to play. And that's what I always think about, certainly all free league games, is like it encourages you to go for it, and it doesn't matter whether the setting is like a sci-fi setting or like deep dark forests with spookies going on in it. For you, because obviously, as you just sort of mentioned, you've done a whole range of different genres or been involved in different genres of RPGs. Is there a particular one that, like a genre that you really love playing or really love writing about?
I don't think the genre itself is the most important thing. I feel most comfortable with fantastical settings. They can be in space, like Coriolis is like a science fantasy kind of, not very hardcore tech setting, more focus on the story, or Symbaroum or Forbidden Lands, where you have the freedom to. For me, I rarely work on the license games for exactly that reason, that I don't want to spend hours and hours and days and even months studying the lore that someone else has created.
Written, right?
Or the same thing goes for settings or games set in real life, where you have to study some city maps from, I don't know,
like real life maps,
and persons and whatnot. For me, I think the most important thing is the freedom to focus on the themes and the dynamics of the story. And not having to be, for me, it feels like being shackled by, in some sense, facts, even if they are fictional facts that someone else has come up with.
I completely agree. This is way off topic. I know we'll get to Symbaroum in a second, but like people love playing in worlds that they've seen or they've read about and stuff like that. But I certainly as a GM, sometimes I get overwhelmed by the canon of it all. And just like, because maybe there's that worry that obviously if you're passionate about a particular film, but other people are passionate about it, but you're not as passionate because you don't know the whole timeline or these tiny little villages that are on, and you're like, it doesn't matter as long as you get the general sense and feel and be encouraged to create your own stuff and make that your canon, then that's what matters. But I agree. So I sometimes see all this wonderful license stuff where I go, I know this stuff and I've watched it, and then I go, oh, but I don't know any of this back. Oh no, I've got to cram it all in before my session, and it doesn't matter. It's what it is. And I completely agree. It's always better to have that time to create your own stuff rather than study. I love that.
Yeah, but I mean, again, luckily there are people of different tastes out there making games. And in the case of our bigger, because I'm mostly focused, my main focus is setting and adventures and lore and stuff, not so much the rules. And for our bigger license games like Alien and Twilight and the upcoming Blade Runner. We have Thomas, who is like the game director and the rules designer at home at Free League. And then we have very good freelance writers that we work with that actually are passionate about, they know everything there is to know about the alien universe. And the things they don't know, they are probably never written down.
It's not written down, and it's not worth knowing, I guess.
Exactly.
No, fair
enough. Yeah, and that's super, because then I get to focus on what I find most joyful.
Interesting.
I mean, editing and such is something that you still can do, but yeah.
No, I agree. Well, let's get right to it then. So for those of us who've been living under rocks, what is Ruins of Symbaroum? And and I know this is a very loaded question, because obviously it's such a big thing that you've worked on, a big part of your life. So can you tell us, I guess, a quick potted history of what Symbaroum is and how we've got now this sort of 5th edition Ruins of Symbaroum coming out very soon?
Symbaroum is a game line that launched in 2016 in English. People call it a dark fantasy setting. I maybe would rather call it a serious or grown-up fantasy setting, maybe, or something like that.
Fair enough.
It's been described, and I think that's quite to the point, like a marriage between Game of Thrones and Princess Mononoke, in the sense that the setting is Game of Thronesy when it comes to how people relate to and react to the world. The setting is populated by, real persons rather than superheroes or whatnot. And the Princess Mononoke parallel is quite obvious as well, since the whole game is designed around the core conflict that is between nature and civilization. And the idea of what would happen if, nature had the capacity to react and respond to our intentions to cultivate and exploit and utilize nature. Since 2016, I believe we have a catalog of between 12 and 15 books. There are a few of them are smaller ones, soft cover, but most of them are, real tomes. Yeah. It's been, established already when we started in 2013-14 working on the game. We discussed whether to try to get a license to work with or try to create an IP from start, and the decision went for the latter, and we knew that it was going to take time to establish something totally new. And the fun thing about Symbaroum is that it seems to be, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, but like when you have a known IP to work with, definitely working. It is gaining momentum year by year, and especially now also in the States. But one thing that we've experienced both ourselves as players back in the day, and now that we meet people at conventions and talk to them online and various social platforms, is that players, especially players, role-playing players, are somewhat creatures of habit.
Yes, no, that is fair.
We have heard from so many game masters coming up to us over the years saying how much they love Symbaroum as a setting and as a system, but they have a super hard time convincing their players to play anything but 5e. And truth be told, one of us, Mattias Lilja, one of the co-designers of Symbaroum, is a big time, I wouldn't say fan maybe, but D&D player.
Sure.
And he started talking very early on about this possibility. Back then it was D20 open gaming license, I think, that now has turned into the 5e OGL. So the idea has sort of always been there, because for us, I mean, we are super proud of the rule set of Symbaroum, and we have designed it the way we love to play games. The freedom of designing your character without any levels or limitations or career paths or whatnot. You have the player-facing dice mechanic where the players roll all the dice. You have the D20, which I don't know, love. Without going into it too much, it's a roll under system and so on. But for us, the setting and the stories told in the setting of Symbaroum has always been, the main passion. So for us,
absolutely,
giving more players and game masters a chance to discover this setting and experience the stories within. It has never been an issue that, we don't like these rules or whatnot, because the rules are just a tool, as we see it, to facilitate the storytelling. And so now, since, it's soon a year since we launched a Kickstarter, I believe, for
around
the
about
Ruins
a
of
year,
Symbaroum.
just over a year, yeah.
I have the books here on my shelf, and I don't know. I'm so super happy. It's quite the standard, opening bundle comes with the player's guide, with not only a lot of new origins and classes and feats and whatnot that are Symbaroum oriented. It also comes with some special new rules to capture, try to capture the Symbaroum feel with the 5e rule set as a base. Because Symbaroum is, as we tend to say, it should be deeper, darker, and deadlier.
Yes.
And to make that happen, we have had to, offer some optionals or new rules for.
I like that as well. Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with you. There is a hesitancy with players because, regardless of the system they start on, I know, like you said, majority of people are into 5e just now, but who knows when that will change in a couple of years' time. But what you said about the setting and the whole sort of world comes first and the tools are just there to help facilitate. I wish more people would think about it like that, rather than like, I want to use this rule set to create my stories. You could tell stories without using dice rolls. You could tell stories with just using tokens and stuff like that. So I just love this idea that you were sort of placed just after sort of this last 20 or so years of conflict. It's very recent. It feels very real. So you have this sort of conflict in the background. And then this idea that humans are sort of like, you've just arrived here in a different world. You're not native to it. You have to deal with all these other outside forces, which can be very alien. And I think it's, for me, it draws on, like, to a lesser extent, I guess, like, moving to a different country or suddenly being upheaved and you're having to reestablish some sort of sense. And so you can really create some amazing stories about it. And like you said, that sort of fantastical settings and just playing it different rather than just like the sort of umbrella term of high fantasy, if you see what I mean. So I really enjoyed that sort of like reading through the history of it and this idea that there is this conflict in the background and this sort of forests are great. Love forests. Love being a deep dark forest. You're like, oh, all the spooky stuff's going to happen here and all this like the scary stuff and that sort of thing. I just was like, this is really cool.
The team that designed Symbaroum together, we have always had this liking. Yeah, we like to design the games around a story arc, you can say. So in this case, Symbaroum's, if someone asks me why play Symbaroum and now 5e, we haven't gotten around to it yet for 5e, but we will most likely do it. The big thing is the Chronicle of the Throne of Thorns, which is like the main campaign of the game, a 6-part. I'm actually currently writing the final part of that campaign, or Chronicle. And already in the core book, we set the stage for that Chronicle or the theme of those adventures. And that also means that you get a sense of the world already being in motion. Things are already happening. Ideas, morals, and disputes over resources. There are already clashes inside the setting that you, as a player creating a character, can tie into. And immediately, because one of I would say the most important thing when you create a setting for playing games in, especially role-playing games, is the conflicts, and not necessarily armed conflicts, but the tension between various positions on the social landscape of the setting. And if you can present those in an interesting way, it will probably become a little bit easier both to create adventures and also as a player to relate to what your character is supposed to care for.
there tends to be sometimes people go, oh yeah, well, there's going to be combat in the sense of like fighting stuff, which there is. I will say that, but I agree. I think like we were talking about before, this idea of role playing now, there is obviously this big shift, certainly with streaming of games and that sort of thing, to make it a narrative, to make it this overarching story. So to have that social encounters and to sort of build that on that world, and I think Game of Thrones has helped with that in a way, that's sort of been going. We know there's a problem far north, but we can't deal with that right now, or no one knows about it because we're too busy sort of infighting between ourselves because we're trying to sort of scrabble at power and stuff. So I think that's just interesting to be when you're such a small part of it, but maybe you get that sort of two version of it. You are in it as a character, but then you are looking over the whole thing going, no, it doesn't feel good. We're gonna do something about it.
I love that about a game. And I think we have, at least to some extent, succeeded in that. I heard one of the players, or one player, comment that in an ongoing discussion on the forum, he said that we consider ourselves to be heroes when we play the game, the good guys. When our company of characters in the world of Symbaroum consider themselves to be the good guys and fighting for the just cause. Still, there has not been one game session where we haven't second-guessed ourselves, both before doing something and then after, looking at the consequences of our good deeds. If there's one thing I hope to do, and I would say that this is something we aspire for when it comes to most free league games, is that never present a clear-cut version of what's good and bad morals. What is good and what is bad is something that, you don't want to, when designing a game, you don't want to contribute to polarization and simplification of moral conflicts in that world or in our world. And it makes for really interesting role playing.
Exactly. Well. That's the thing. It's the thing where I love that comment you just said about the second guessing about yourself before and then after, because that makes you want to keep playing. You want to find out, and that means there's such a, if you are that sort of person to, at the end, there's a big replayability as well, I guess. Like, sort of, well, I want to know, what if we'd done this bit? And usually as a GM, you're going, oh, I hadn't really planned for that, but actually I'd done all this work for it. So I think that's just a credit to your game. And that idea that here's the world as it stands. It's all grey. There's no black and white, like good versus evil. Like, it's what you put in it. I think that those make the more interesting stories. I'm sure you would have that sort of like, well, this is definitely goes to sort this out. But there are people that are sort of proxies and petitioners of both sides that are sort of in between, which I always think it's great for NPC work. So
exactly. NPCs become super important in a setting like that. And also, you said there's combat. Yeah, there's combat in Symbaroum and in Ruins of Symbaroum, and it is more deadly. And that is not because we love total party kills.
No,
it is because we want to encourage the players and characters to try to find other ways to solve the situation or handle the situation. Because are you like 20 days walk inside the borders of Davokar forest and you become hurt or your wound become infected or whatnot, you are in trouble. And that is not only true for you, that is true for the creatures that you meet.
Everyone around you.
So I don't know where I was going with that, but the thing is not only second guess in the terms of morals, but actually discussing strategies in terms of, what risks are we willing to take in order to reach what goal, and trying to reason with, the one standing in the way of your intended target or goal or whatever, trying to reason what are they prepared to risk. And in the end Symbaroum, I would hope, encourages social role play in the sense that you will try to negotiate with maybe not the blight beasts or abominations of Davokar, because they are kind of not
ones to be reasoned
super
with.
open to diplomacy.
They're not keen. That's fair. So let's talk about it. So obviously, Ruins of Symbaroum obviously is coming out. Obviously, as you've mentioned, is under the sort of the 5th edition open game license. I know there has been some tweaks to obviously sort of appeals, like you just sort of mentioned this. Obviously, it's obviously 5e sort of settings, so rules, so 5e players will recognize some of the things, but like you've made some additional things, correct? So like this idea of corruption, I wondered if you could talk a little bit to that.
Oh yeah. Corruption is a concept from the original game that is sort of, it captures this main theme or conflict of the game, the struggle between civilization and nature. So what corruption is basically nature's response to being controlled, cultivated, exploited, twisted by will, the will of civilization. So one very evident case is the use of magic, meaning that if you cast a spell or perform a ritual or whatnot, you will be tainted by corruption. Nature will harm you in return. You can, to some extent, reduce this effect by joining a mystical tradition that has found various, practices to maybe hide what they are doing a little bit from nature or shield themselves from corruption. But you will always be affected. And if it goes far, if you amass too much corruption, you will start to express itself physically in your, you get blisters that never heal, or you get, stench of sulfur around your horn-like outgrowths on the forehead or whatnot. Nature will try to beastify you more or less. I don't think it's conscious in what it's doing, but that's the effect of it. If it goes really, really far, your player character will become an NPC, will turn into a raving abomination that is no longer playable. And you can also suffer corruption from other effects, such as certain monsters that actually deal corruption damage in addition to physical damage. There are certain areas in the Forest of Davokar especially, but also in other places of the world that are infectious. Something may have happened in this place, or some great abomination may be buried under a thin layer of roots and soil, and the whole area is infectious with corruption. So, and you don't want to stay there for very long. So one thing that this means for the 5e special rules is that we don't have spell slots in Ruins of Symbaroum. Instead, you gain corruption when you use magic, meaning that the limitation of what you can do or how many spells you can cast is not determined by memorizing a certain amount per level, but instead of how much corruption so it becomes sort of a tactical gamble. Do I dare cast another spell knowing that I risk becoming blight marked or even thoroughly corrupt? So that is corruption. I don't know if
I mean, that is such a cool concept in general. Like this, because I think many people are like, oh yeah, I could do magic. I can just throw fireballs everywhere, that sort of thing. But like you said, it's a gamble. This idea that, there's not that restriction of like, oh yeah, spell slots, that's a mechanic per se. It's just about, well, if I do this, it's just increasing more and more. So you're having to pick, and I feel like it's such a very narrative way of telling and the idea that magic is, this corruption is sort of addiction per se, perhaps. And just, I love that, like, the traditions in the sense of like, we'll teach you how to use it or to prevent it, but you can't always prevent it. It's always going to happen at some point. So it's almost like this inevitability is sort of a corruption, which I think that's such a cool story thing. And I think it just adds to it. So I can imagine lots of players really wanting to create characters that can do magic, who want to use it, but having to have this sort of almost like internal struggle between themselves, going, I can save my friends, but at the cost of losing myself. Really cool.
Yeah, and also knowing, I mean, according to the elves of the Iron Pact, which are, humanity's big antagonists in this setting, the elves they occupy about the same role or function as the orc would in another game, the default enemy, so to speak. They would argue that the magical practice in itself harms not only you, but the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are most Ambrians, the civilized people, they kind of scoff at the elves, claiming that they are just, trying to limit the sources of human power and influence by spreading lies.
Mm-hmm.
But there are humans that, on the one hand, you have the sorcerers, as they are called, that actually use the power of corruption to enhance their magic and spells. They are on a very slippery slope towards becoming, but they exist among the humans. On the other hand, you have the witches of the clan folks in Davokar, who in their mind does good. They are the champions of nature in some sense, but the magic they weave still cause corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Just like for the elves, that there are elves that use magic as well. So you claim to do good, but in the end, what you do is not necessarily. You have good intentions, but the methods you are using are clearly
justify
harmful.
it. Yeah, absolutely. Big question. What was your favorite bit to write on or to be a part? I know it's like, I know. Whoa. Is there a particular bit that stood out to you going, this is really, like, you enjoyed really writing about it? And I will say, like, obviously with it coming out, and you've said you've got the books already, you can't say, it's because I've got the books in my hand, that's the best bit. No. It's like, what was the best bit of writing the setting, I guess?
Okay, in retrospect, or what I had most fun?
Either or. Because I'd appreciate, it's like, oh God, I'm really struggling to write, and then it was fine in the end, I really enjoyed it, etc.
But the thing is, your question is a little bit unfair,
I know.
Yeah, the thing is, while writing, even if it's, stimulating and inspiring and fun, it is
work.
Difficult.
Yes.
It is work. It is, so it's mostly in retrospect that you feel it. But when it comes to Symbaroum, the whole Chronicle of the Throne of Thorns is, writing a 6-part, and we are now talking like 170 to 220 page books, and having them stay interesting, not only for the players, but for the GM. So the best part is writing these adventures and feeling like you are not creating or designing, but discovering stuff about the lore or about the actions of various NPCs, or that sense when you feel that you are at one with the story, when you feel that things fall into place. I would say that those moments are worth everything.
There's such a difference between like creating, which is fun in itself, I agree, but that natural discovery and going, of course this was always going to be like this, or I get it. There's a real special joy in that, and I guess that's when you can tell that you've really, like you said, really become one with the setting, because it's just so natural, and a natural progression and stuff. It just makes it a lot, like you said, not easier to write, because obviously you still need to get what's in here in your head onto the page, but it's just like, of course it, and you can see it sort of coming out from you rather than worrying about what it's going. So that's like a sign of a true writer connected with the setting, which is awesome. So good on that.
Yeah, and I could give you several examples, but I won't, because they would be spoilers.
What? Okay.
Of course. But you have these main characters that you sometimes wonder, why are they acting the way they do? And then one day you actually discover what it is that makes them tick, or make them somewhat irrational, it may seem, or and those moments when you when you feel that you understand your characters and things just fall into place, those are marvelous.
Yeah. So I guess we're starting slowly to wrap up now, but I wanted to know sort of what would be your main advice for any GM who's picked up Symbaroum for the first time or is getting the Ruins of Symbaroum. What would your main advice be for them about to play or run a game in this universe?
Going to be a little dull, but I still feel that this cannot be said too many times. The main advice is that what you have in your hands in front of you in the terms of core books or adventure books are tool sets. Mm-hmm. They are meant to be adapted to the preferred style and preferences of you and your gaming group. Mm-hmm. There is no way for a GM to play an official adventure wrong.
Yeah,
exactly. No way. So because I sometimes get that people are, almost afraid to, because of course, the Throne of Thorns is kind of a daunting set of campaign books. I understand that some people can feel it, and they are, I talk to people who said that they feel afraid to misrepresent the story or misrepresent this or that. You can't, because what we do is pointless until it is played. Mm-hmm. And it is all to pick any of our adventures, it will be played in 1,000 different ways, depending on the setup of the composition of the players, the composition of their PCs, the game master's likes and dislikes, and a whole variety of reasons. Whether they play all day long or just one time every 5th week, or online, or at the table. Mm-hmm. So the game is yours, and make the most of it. Make what you want of it, and have fun doing that. Don't be afraid.
I love that. Yeah, don't be afraid. It's always
don't be afraid.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's really good.
Also, maybe don't be afraid to discuss these sort of things with your players.
Yeah,
and with other GMs. I mean, there are so many places for GMs to meet and discuss.
So thank you so much for obviously this interview. It's been I'm really excited now to dive in deeper into this lore, this setting, because it's such a cool, like you said, it's got everything I want actually as a setting. So I'm hoping to run it at some point. So I'm very, very excited. So thank you for that. Can you tell us what are your sort of plans for the future? I appreciate you've just, your Kickstarter is now fulfilled, but do you have any other upcoming projects, any other thing? Like you talked a little bit about these campaign books and stuff. So what are you up to in sort of the world of Symbaroum, or any other projects you've got going on just now?
Symbaroum as the original game and as 5e will probably and hopefully and most likely live on for very long. First up is now the final part in the Throne of Thorns Chronicle, which will today, when it's shipping and printing and whatnot, is such a strange world we live in today. So I don't dare to. But the ambition is to have it out before the end of the year.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I am also working on currently editing one massive, 240-page, and one smaller adventure book for 5e. Both are sort of collections of adventures. So the first one includes 7 adventures, the massive one, and the second one, 2 more high-level adventures. And those, I hope to see those 2 released before the end of this year. They were part of the Kickstarter, so if you're curious about them, you can look up the Ruins of Symbaroum Kickstarter and get more information about what's to come. Other than that, we have sort of secret projects that are still to be announced. So let's skip those.
We'll keep those on the wraps. No worries.
And for me personally, and for Free League in general, we have quite a lot of pots cooking, stews in the making, and you will see. Again, we have the Blade Runner Kickstarter right now, and we will see more announcements before the end of this year,
Yes.
both in terms of actually new games and of course supplements and more stuff for the
more
already
things.
more stuff for the games we already have.
Perfect. I mean, like, I could just imagine Free League is just literally a busy kitchen with so many pots going on. It's always like it seems like every other week I'm like, there's another thing coming out. Amazing. But oh my goodness, they're working so hard. So yeah, I completely agree. If you haven't, those people listening, if you haven't signed up to Free League's like newsletter or stuff like that, do it, because you'll always get something every week and it always makes you very excited and want to spend more money. So that's what I'm very excited for.
That's very good for us. I think you also get a discount on a purchase when you sign up for the newsletter. So that's a super good idea.
I think it's a great idea. So go do that. So obviously, finally, where can we follow your work? Where can we get Ruins of Symbaroum? And do you have any social media that people can follow?
Yeah, freeleaguepublishing.com is, of course, the main place to go. Maybe you can post a link somewhere about that.
Yeah.
Then we have pretty good presence on Facebook, both as Free League, and there are several Symbaroum pages, or what do you call them?
Pages.
Groups.
Groups. I see. Yeah.
Yeah, for like GMs and for players and different languages, and because our games are translated into, I think Symbaroum is 6 languages by now, besides Swedish and English.
Yeah.
So those would be the main places to go. On the freeleaguepublishing.com, you can also find our chat forum for both Symbaroum original and the 5e version.
Brilliant.
See you there.
Yeah, see you there. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mattias. I appreciate you spending the time to talk to me. And honestly, like I said, you've done this for so many years now. You've got a whole line of work, so you don't need me saying congratulations on doing so well. But I'm glad that.
Oh, it's still good to hear. It's still good.
Okay, I'll keep saying it. Congratulations on getting here, and I'm glad it's still silly, but it's still a joyous, fun thing for you to do. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. This was great.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or think of an RPG designer you would like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.